to you that I considered such topics as dealing with depression and others as lighthearted. I would simply like to clarify for the record exactly what those sentences said. Some of our sessions will be very serious. Some will be lighthearted, feel-goody, serious. Topics we will consider this year include, and then I proceeded to list about 4 of those topics. Also, it appeared that a lot of our discussion, or at least a lot of the challenges that came from my affirmation of the proposition, focused upon fellowship. I cannot help but believe that that is really what is at the heart of this issue. And that for the 150 some odd years that we have been disagreeing about the appropriateness, the rightness, or the sinfulness of the use of mechanical instruments of music in the worship of God, the greater question has been one of fellowship and receiving one another, that we are encouraged to do in Christ. In effect, one of the questions that Mr. Vaughn presented to me this evening stated the New Testament church can fellowship with any religious group that confesses Jesus as the Son of God, regardless of what they teach on baptism. I'm sure that Mr. Vaughn will advise you the way I answered that, and so much I feel like that I should make it known that the word fellowship, as all words, are used to mean just what we intend for them to mean, and that the word fellowship is often used in different ways to refer to totally unrelated issues and items. The word fellowship is often used to a gathering of good people, sometimes church people, sometimes not, for food and friendliness, a dinner, a social, for whatever purpose, religious or no. The word fellowship is sometimes used for simple gatherings for the sake of being together, for fun, and the development of friendship and informality, such as some tendency to linger longer after worship. The word fellowship is also used to refer to formal affiliation, like a fellowship within universities, or a fellowship with a council of churches. Sometimes the word fellowship is used to refer to fictitious affiliation, like one's maintaining membership in the old church back home. There is the official favor or approved listing that the word fellowship is sometimes meant to describe, which consists merely of a list of acceptable persons. The word fellowship is certainly used to describe the family relationship by faith and obedience to the gospel of Jesus Christ, in the sense of being born into the same family. That type of fellowship is characterized by having a like precious faith in Christ, participating in the same pardon and access to God, the new birth into the Lord's brotherhood, fellowship with His Son Jesus, and with the one and only one body of saints. The word fellowship is also used to describe a function, a sharing together in a work, which might encompass few or many areas. By definition, fellowship is having things in common. Having things in common. Being partners or sharing interests, efforts towards a common goal, in some way or degree belonging to one another. And it is within that context that I answered the question regarding fellowship with other religious groups. At this point, I would like to make a confession, if I might. It is not a confession of the proposition as I read it to you and defined for you, that it is rather a concession to Mr. Vaughn. Now, before I make this concession, I'm going to ask him to grant me a concession. Since it is my opinion that Mr. Vaughn does not consider me to be a Christian and does not consider me to be among the saved, I rather conclude that it is impossible for him to refer to me as Brother Lewis. However, I find it very very formal and aloof and not really appropriate to the intention and the desire that I have in these discussions to constantly refer to a man for whom I have admiration, a man that I know loves the Lord Jesus Christ with all of his heart, consistently to refer to him as Mr. And so since he considers me to be in error regarding the use of musical instruments, he may as well consider me to be in error if I should slip and occasionally call him Brother Vaughn. My concession to Brother Vaughn is that for whatever reason, he has not found it acceptable to accept the definition regarding the proposition as I expounded, in which I distinguish between the word explicit and specific. Therefore, if we are to word this proposition in the same way and to enter into and accept Brother Vaughn's understanding and definition of explicit as being specific, that is, to define, to describe in detail, then certainly to say that the New Testament teaches that all things which are not explicitly or specifically by name forbidden by the New Testament may be done by men living today without their being guilty of sin in so doing, must certainly be denied by myself and anyone who is a student of the sacred Scripture. Notwithstanding, we are still left within this proposition with the statement, the use of mechanical instrumental music in the worship of God is a specific instance of an act not forbidden by the New Testament, and that I most heartily continue to affirm, realizing that to affirm from the standpoint of my honorable foe or opponent means to give a specific command. For indeed, in regards to one of his charts, that chart indicated that when God gives a specific command, everything not included in that command is excluded. Now, I shall address the fine points of that statement, though I basically agree with it. I shall nevertheless address those at the appropriate time on Thursday and Friday, as I would deny the proposition as affirmed by Mr. Vaughn. And so let me simply say this, in affirmation of the statement that the use of mechanical instrumental music in the worship of God is a specific instance of an act not forbidden by the New Testament. It is, first of all, not forbidden because there is no Scripture, either in Old or New Testament, which hints at, much less states, that such a use of instrumentation in any way violates any command regarding worship any example regarding worship or any logical inference regarding worship. I further believe that God ordained the use of instrumental music in the temple worship, that Jesus, the apostles, and early Christians regularly attended to the temple where instrumental music was offered in worship, and we may therefore, by using the same principles of government, law, or command that my brother uses, conclude that we may worship today where instrumental music is a part of that worship. You see, as I understand it, and if I am mistaken, I know that Brother Vaughn will correct me. Authority, as he recognizes and accepts it, comes to us by commandment, biblical example, and logical inference. Instrumental music is a commandment that God gave, and nowhere in Scripture ever abrogated or changed his mind on, at least that he let us know about. In 2 Chronicles chapter 29, verse 25, regarding the cleansing of the temple by Hezekiah, he then stationed, he being Hezekiah, the Levites in the house of the Lord with cymbals, with harps, and with lyres, according to the command of David, and of Gad the king's seer, and of Nathan the prophet. For the command was from the Lord through the prophet. God approved of the temple. Some have suggested that the temple was totally David's idea and that God never approved of it. He simply accepted it, much like he accepted some of the principles regarding divorce, though he hated divorce. Nevertheless, 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verses 12 and 16 establish the fact that God himself did approve of the temple. And he also commanded music to be played with instrumentation in the temple. And as I stated, there is no record in the Scriptures where he ever repealed or canceled that command. Furthermore, God was pleased with the worship that was given to him in this temple, worship which included instrumental music. From 2 Chronicles chapter 5, verses 12 through 14. And all of the Levitical singers, Asaph, Heman, Jeduthun, and their sons and kinsmen, clothed in fine linen, with cymbals, harps, and lyres, standing east of the altar, and with them 120 priests blowing trumpets, in unison when the trumpeters and the singers were to make themselves heard with one voice, to praise and to glorify the Lord. And when they lifted up their voice, accompanied by trumpets and cymbals and instruments of music, and when they praised the Lord, saying, He indeed is good, for his loving kindness is everlasting, then the house of the Lord was filled with a cloud, so that the priest could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of God. Anna, the prophetess, worshipped constantly in the temple, according to chapter 2 in the book of Luke, verses 36 and 37. Certainly, as a prophetess, had the practices of worship with instruments been detestable in God's sight, he would have sent a message. By way of example, now examples are interesting things. We're not sure that they prove anything, but some people think they do. And so by example, let us consider the truth that Jesus, in cleansing the temple, drove out the money changers. He did not drive out the musicians. In Matthew chapter 21, verses 12 and 13, Jesus entered the temple and cast out all those who were buying and selling in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. And he said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a robber's den." Jesus taught daily in the temple. In Matthew 26, verse 55. At that time Jesus said to the multitude, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a robber? Every day I used to sit in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me." Jesus taught daily in the temple. That's interesting when compared to a statement by Moses Laird. "Let every preacher in our ranks resolve at once that he will never, under any circumstances or on any account, enter a meeting house belonging to our brethren in which an organ stands. We beg and entreat our preaching brethren to adopt this as an unalterable rule of conduct." It bothered Moses Laird. It did not bother Jesus, apparently, to teach and visit the temple wherein was worship involving instrumental music. The apostles, after Jesus had ascended into heaven, frequented the temple according to the Gospel of Luke chapter 24, verses 52 and 53. And they returned to Jerusalem with great joy, and were continually in the temple, praising God. The early Christians continued to go to the temple after they had repented of their sins and been baptized, had their sins forgiven, and received the promised Holy Spirit. Acts chapter 2, verse 46 tells us, "And day by day they continued with one mind in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart." Peter and John entered the temple at the hour of prayer, according to Acts chapter 3 and verse 1. In verse 8 of chapter 3, we're told that they also were with the lame man that the Lord had healed through them as he entered the temple. We are also told that the apostles preached in the temple. In chapter 5, verses 19 and 20. They were actually, as the scripture says, where an angel of the Lord during the night opened the gates of the prison. Taking them out, he said, "Go your way, stand and speak to the people in the temple the whole message of this life." In fact, the priests of the temple, many of whom had the responsibility of playing the instruments of music in which worship was lifted to God, the priests, many of them, were converted to Christianity. Acts chapter 6, verse 7. The word of God kept on spreading, and the number of the disciples continued to increase greatly in Jerusalem, and great many of the priests were becoming obedient to the faith. Paul, after his conversion to Christianity, also entered the temple. He prayed there, according to Acts chapter 22, verse 17, and when he was questioned and accused of disrupting the temple, in the 24th chapter of the book of Acts, verses 11 and 12, Paul states he went there specifically to worship. Since you can take note of the fact that no more than 12 days ago I went up to Jerusalem to worship, and neither in the temple, nor in the synagogues, nor in the city itself did they find me carrying on a discussion with anyone, that is a disputation, or causing a riot. By example, Jesus, the apostles, the early Christians would teach us that God is certainly not opposed and has not forbidden the use of mechanical instruments in worship to Him. And also the logical inference. In Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 19, and in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 16, we are referred to psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Now let it be conceded that the words psalmos and psallo, the noun and verb respectively, do not always signify the use of musical instruments. And in fact, the word psalmos had come to mean the collection of all the psalms in the Old Covenant Scriptures. All the psalms, many of whom, which no doubt were performed without the use of instruments. However, as is the typical and sound way of determining the meaning of Scripture, our goal is to understand the Scriptures the way the people to whom they were written, the common, the uneducated people who were first given the privilege of this great word. How did they understand this? I wish to document what I am going to share with you from an article entitled Christian Fellowship and Instrumental Music by Wilbur Field. The Apostle Paul exhorts us, Mr. Field says, to speak to one another in psalms. The word psalmos in the plural, as in Ephesians 5:19, is used numerous times in the New Testament to refer to the book of Psalms, for instance, Luke 24:44 and Acts 1:20, as well as to songs which took their general character from the Psalms. He also says that the verb psallo, used in Romans 15:9, 1 Corinthians 14:15, Ephesians 5:19, and James 5:13, and its cognate noun, psalmos, used in Luke 20:42, Luke 24:44, Acts 1:20, Acts 13:33, 1 Corinthians 14:26, Ephesians 5:19, and Colossians 3:16, meant to play and later to sing to a harp in. This is what the word meant in the so-called apostolic fathers, in the uninspired literature of the New Testament time, and in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament Scriptures, and in classical Greek authors, Chrysostom, Gregory of Nicaea, Clement of Alexandria, Josephus, Suetonius, others, using the term as such to describe, excuse me, it is a song, ode, not a psalm, because it is rendered with musical expression by the voice alone, that is, in not. In his homily on Psalm 44, that was Basil, A.D. 364. Gives the same meaning, however, to psalmos, referring in that statement to the contrast between the use of the musical instrument and the non-use of it, between psalm and hymn. Why would Paul use the word psallo, which meant to play in the common literature of the day, if he considered it wrong to use the instrument? The Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, translated about 270 years before Christ, often used the word psallo to translate the Hebrew words zamar and negan, which by consent of all lexicons means to play music. Dr. W.L. Straub, in his notes on instrumental music, states that when Hebrew words such as ranan, which do not imply instrumental music, but only vocal music are used, no form of psallo is ever used to translate them, and he cites 24 examples of this. Now, either the New Testament uses the word follow like the Septuagint used it, or it changed its meaning between the time of the Septuagint's writing and when the New Testament was written. But there is no evidence of the change of meaning. Josephus, Plutarch, and others of New Testament times used the word with the same meaning that was understood by the ordinary reader and hearer of that gospel message. Thank you. The word follow, as defined in the Synonyms of the New Testament by Richard Prince, refers to the song sung with this musical accompaniment. In Emmanuel Greek Lexicon of the New Testament by G. Abbott Smith, follow is stated as a sacred song sung to musical accompaniment, a psalm. Likewise, a sacred song sung to musical accompaniment, a psalm, as in an expository dictionary of New Testament words, W. E. Vaughn. A hymn, on the other hand, is defined as follows. The psalms were accompanied by instruments, the hymns were mainly vocal, and the song, the ode, was a general term comprehending both. That according to the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. Again, the word psalmos and its related forms not always referred to the use of mechanical instruments, but when used in conjunction with hymnos and ode, may safely be inferred to permit, to authorize, and certainly not forbid the use of mechanical instruments in the worship of our great God and Savior.